Steiner was among the most insanely jacked men on the planet during his prime. But what does he look like today? Stars such as Batista and Triple H built entire careers around their unbelievable physiques. So what happened after they got off the sauce? In this video, we're answering those questions and plenty more as we look at the WWE legends whose physiques completely changed. And we're starting with none other than the Animal. Batista entered WWE in the early 2000s looking like he had been carved straight out of granite. At his peak, he was pushing nearly 290 pounds of pure muscle. But he wasn't simply huge for the sake of being huge. He moved like a genuine powerhouse. Every clothesline looked like a car crash, and every spear felt devastating. He captured the World Heavyweight Championship multiple times, and for years, he was practically the exact template of what Vince McMahon wanted a top WWE star to look like. But when Batista left WWE and headed toward Hollywood, his physique took a complete 180. In 2023, while preparing for the psychological thriller Knock at the Cabin, the director wanted him to appear like an intimidating hulking presence rather than a shredded powerlifter. So Batista bulked up quickly, eating pancakes and French fries between takes until he ballooned to around 315 pounds. In his own words, he became uncomfortably big, and the transformation happened so rapidly that his body didn't handle it well. After filming ended, Batista said the weight took forever to disappear, so he turned toward jiu-jitsu, training for hours at a time while gradually stripping the weight away. But then Big Dave made another drastic change. In 2024, he appeared at a red carpet event looking slimmer than ever and lighter than many of the cruiserweights he used to destroy during his wrestling days. Batista has said this transformation was completely intentional because he didn't want to look like a gorilla standing beside other Hollywood stars. He's now the lightest he's been since he was a teenager, sacrificing the mass that made him a wrestling icon in exchange for more range as an actor. But while Batista's transformation was intentional, the next wrestler went from possessing one of the most inspiring physiques ever to fighting simply to stand on his own 2 feet again. Before Lex Luger ever entered a wrestling ring, he was already an elite athlete who played football at Penn State and the University of Miami. But when he moved into professional wrestling, he looked as if he'd been built specifically in a laboratory to intimidate people. Vince McMahon understood exactly what he had and introduced Luger as the Narcissist, a character who would literally pose in the mirror before matches just to display a physique fans could hardly believe. For a period during the early 1990s, there may not have been a more physically dominant look anywhere in the industry. Luger never quite reached the very top of the wrestling business, but his physique consistently remained one of his biggest strengths. Then came October 19, 2007. Luger suffered a nerve impingement in his neck that caused a spinal stroke, leaving him temporarily paralyzed. By 2014, he was using a wheelchair full-time. He could still live independently, feed himself, and manage his day-to-day life. But the man who once possessed arguably the most beautiful physique in wrestling had lost nearly all voluntary control of his body. For years, it appeared that this was where his story ended. Then Luger reconnected with longtime friend and fellow Hall of Famer Diamond Dallas Page, and the two began a slow rehabilitation process using DDP yoga. By February 2025, Luger was able to stand completely unassisted from his wheelchair for the first time in nearly 2 decades. It's not the transformation anyone expected, but it may be the most meaningful transformation on this entire list. And speaking of physiques being undone by the body giving out, our next wrestler built one of the most feared frames in history, only to watch his own heart nearly take it all away. By the early 2000s, Triple H had developed a physique that perfectly matched his nickname. The game looked like he belonged on the cover of a bodybuilding magazine. He had thick, dense muscle and the kind of conditioning that made him look like a main event monster. Even during the later part of his career, he repeatedly found ways to return to peak shape, always maintaining an impressive physique during battles against Daniel Bryan, Seth Rollins, and Roman Reigns. But everything changed in September 2021. Triple H developed viral pneumonia that quickly became something much more serious. His wife Stephanie McMahon noticed that he was coughing up blood and urged him to get checked immediately. Doctors discovered fluid around his lungs and heart, and his ejection fraction, which measures how efficiently the heart pumps blood, with a healthy range around 55 to 60%, had fallen to only 12% by the next morning. He was in severe heart failure and extremely close to the worst possible outcome. Doctors performed emergency surgery at Yale New Haven Hospital and later confirmed that the cardiac event had been caused by an underlying genetic heart condition. They also fitted him with a defibrillator. By March 2022, Triple H announced that he would never wrestle in a ring again, a decision made largely by his own heart. Intense physical exertion, including the type of training that had defined his entire adult life, was simply no longer an option. And like virtually every wrestler who comes off a serious training regimen, his muscle definition softened, while the once chiseled frame became far less sculpted. Photos of Triple H in the years afterward, including candid pictures from vacations with his wife and children, showed a visibly different man from the one fans had watched dominate WrestleMania main events for years. The difference in Triple H's story is that he no longer needed his physique because his job title had changed completely. But while Triple H lost his physique because of a medical emergency that was entirely outside his control, the next legend's transformation became one of the most debated subjects in pop culture. For most of his wrestling career, The Rock had a lean, athletic build. He was muscular, but nowhere near the size people now associate with him. That changed years later, deep into his Hollywood career, when his physique grew into something almost unrecognizable. His arms became thick, his chest became massive, and his vascularity reached a level that resembled a competitive bodybuilder. That change created years of speculation. Fitness analysts like Derek from More Plates, More Dates have examined his physique in detail. Even Joe Rogan has said that there was no chance he was doing it clean at his age, pointing out that natural testosterone decline after 40 makes that level of size and conditioning extremely difficult to maintain without roids. The Rock has always attributed his physique to nothing more than hard work in his personal gym. But the skepticism surrounding him has never really disappeared. Then, in 2025, something changed again. Fans were stunned when The Rock appeared at the Venice Film Festival looking dramatically slimmer than the version they had become accustomed to seeing for years. He explained that the change was intentional weight loss for an upcoming movie role, saying he wanted to finally be taken seriously as a dramatic actor after years of being typecast in the same action roles. Predictably, the rumors immediately returned, with plenty of people speculating that he had simply come off whatever he had been using. Whatever the real explanation, the change was dramatic enough that his most jacked era is probably behind him for good. Whether steroids, hard work, or some combination of both built that body in the first place, The Rock's physique has clearly entered another chapter. But while his transformation happened beneath the bright lights of Hollywood, our next wrestler's transformation happened inside the ring, right in front of wrestling fans. Chris Jericho was never the biggest name in the locker room, and that was always part of his appeal. Throughout his runs in WCW and WWE, Jericho built his career around a rockstar persona that made him feel much bigger than his actual frame. Even without a bodybuilder's physique, Jericho stayed in consistently strong athletic shape for most of 3 decades. However, around 2020, Jericho gained a massive amount of weight while wrestling in AEW and New Japan. Jericho said the transformation was intentional because he wanted a bulkier, villainous appearance for the Japanese audience, but fans were quick to troll Y2J over his new physique. In recent years, he has looked noticeably leaner and more conditioned, particularly during his return to All Elite Wrestling in 2026. What makes Jericho different from most of the wrestlers on this list is that there was never one specific moment or public scandal connected to his transformation. And in an industry filled with cautionary tales, there is something almost admirable about a wrestler who is still lacing up his boots deep into his 50s. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the next wrestler on this list. Jake Roberts never looked like Lex Luger or the other muscle-bound stars of his era, but he was lean, athletic, and one of the most intimidating performers wrestling has ever produced. The DDT, the snake, and the promos that made grown adults uncomfortable all helped make Roberts one of the most memorable characters of his generation. He didn't need enormous size to create that impact. However, things changed dramatically once his in-ring career began winding down. Roberts struggled for years with addiction to drugs and alcohol, and by the time he retired in 2008, his health had deteriorated badly. He checked himself into rehab the year before, but the damage was already building. As the years continued, His weight climbed beyond 300 pounds, and he found himself financially troubled and barely functional. The turnaround came when Roberts moved into Diamond Dallas Page's Atlanta home, entering a supportive and structured environment for the first time in years. Through DDP yoga, Roberts lost around 70 pounds and rebuilt both his health and his self-respect. He described the experience as life-saving, and that turnaround eventually led to his WWE Hall of Fame induction in 2014 and a level of stability in his later years that once seemed completely out of reach. Roberts never got his old physique back, and he wasn't trying to. What he got back was his life. But not every wrestler on this list who lost his body managed to find his way back. The next name became one of the most tragic examples of just how badly things can go. Few physiques in wrestling history were as iconic or scrutinized as Hulk Hogan's. The famous 24-inch pythons and the larger-than-life presence helped make him the single biggest star wrestling had ever produced. Hogan's body wasn't simply part of his character. In many ways, it was his entire character. Throughout the 1980s, thousands of fans filled wrestling arenas to watch Hogan flex. The turning point came during Vince McMahon's 1994 steroid trial, when Hogan admitted under oath that he had used steroids for years. It became one of the most consequential moments of the steroid scandal that shook WWE during the early 1990s, forcing Hogan, along with many others, to publicly confront how much of his appearance had been chemically assisted. Almost immediately after that admission, fans noticed a visible change. By the middle of the 1990s, during his WCW run, Hogan looked dramatically smaller than he had during his peak WWF run. Hogan was still in solid shape for a man his age, but the larger-than-life, cartoonish size that had defined him throughout the 1980s was gone for good. As the decades continued, Hogan's physique became smaller still. But while Hogan's transformation happened in front of millions of people, the next wrestler's body gave up before he could even reach main event status. Before ever signing with WWE, Chris Hero had built a reputation as one of the most technically gifted wrestlers on the independent scene, working for promotions such as Ring of Honor and Combat Zone Wrestling. When he first arrived in NXT in 2012 under the name Cassius Ohno, he was lean and sharp, carrying the look of a dangerous striking technician built for combat. WWE released him in 2013. When he returned to NXT in January 2017, the conversation wasn't centered on his in-ring work. Instead, much of it focused on how much heavier he appeared compared with his first run. Despite that, Hero continued performing at a high level across both runs, and plenty of critics pointed out that his wrestling ability had never diminished, even while his conditioning became a major talking point. The heavier appearance might have worked for wrestlers such as Kevin Owens and Bray Wyatt, but it simply didn't suit Hero in the same way, while his back injuries made it harder for him to meet WWE's aesthetic standards. But while Chris Hero was never primarily a physique wrestler, our next name represents the exact opposite extreme. A physique so freakish in its prime that fans still argue about whether it was even humanly possible. During the early 1990s, Scott Steiner and his brother Rick were already an imposing tag team, tearing through WCW's division. But when Scott went solo and transformed into Big Papa Pump, things became completely absurd. His arms alone became a major talking point throughout the industry. WCW legend Arn Anderson said Steiner could have qualified for a Mr. Olympia bodybuilding contest based purely on how he looked at his peak. According to Steiner himself, the transformation wasn't really about adding a dramatic amount of size. In an interview on the Chris Van Vliet podcast, he explained that he didn't get a whole lot bigger. Instead, he became extremely lean and ripped, and the extreme muscle definition created an illusion that made him look even bigger than he actually was. Whatever the real explanation, the Big Papa Pump look became one of the most talked about physiques of the entire Monday Night Wars era. Steiner eventually retired from full-time wrestling and was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2022 alongside his brother Rick. Today, he looks considerably leaner and smaller than the freakish version fans obsessed over during the late 1990s. Considering how extreme his look was at its peak and how much strain that level of muscularity can put on a body over the long term, it may be one of the smarter outcomes. Steiner's physique may have faded, but his blunt, no-filter commentary has remained just as sharp as ever. And if you want to find out what WWE wrestlers actually eat year-round to maintain their physiques, check out this video.